Perfectionism is often seen as a flaw, but what if I told you it's also a hidden engine for greatness? Today, we'll explore how perfectionism can either sharpen your edge or slowly dull your spirit. Let's start by clearing a common misconception. Perfectionism isn't always toxic. In psychology, it actually comes in two distinct forms. One uplifts, the other quietly corrodes. The two forms of perfectionism. The first is called personal standards perfectionism, PSP. Think of it as self-directed excellence. You set high expectations, not because you have to, but because you want to. You pursue mastery out of passion, not pressure. This mindset thrives in top performers, in athletes who push themselves after every win, in artists who sketch one more draft, not for applause, but for the joy of refinement. PSP is the fuel behind extraordinary persistence. A writer who rewrites the same paragraph 10 times, not out of fear, but because they love the process of sculpting their thoughts. A violinist who spends 4 hours on a single phrase, not to impress a judge, but to touch a deeper sense of harmony. PSP doesn't obsess with being the best. It obsesses with becoming better. Then there's the darker version, externally concerned perfectionism, ECP. Here, your ambition isn't self-fueled. It's fear-driven. Instead of chasing growth, you're fleeing judgment. It's not about becoming your best. It's about avoiding failure, rejection, or disapproval. The goal isn't progress, it's protection. Where PSP is curiosity, ECP is anxiety. ECP doesn't grow out of thin air. It's often rooted in early experiences, especially within families where love felt conditional, where affection came only after achievement. Did your childhood feel like a stage where mistakes meant punishment, not guidance? If so, you may have learned a dangerous lesson. Only the flawless are worthy of love. This is where the damage begins. Let's say you brought home a 90 on a test. If all you heard was, "Where's the other 10%?" Your brain started wiring for impossibility. Maybe you scored in a game, but your parents focused on the shot you missed. Even when you succeeded, the message echoed, "Not enough." Over time, your internal compass twisted. Effort didn't bring relief, only more pressure. Mistakes became threats. Success, never quite safe. Eventually, your brain drew a brutal conclusion. If perfection can't be reached, why try at all? The brain on perfectionism. Toxic perfectionism doesn't just affect how you feel, it reshapes how your brain operates. When someone with ECP encounters a mistake, their mind doesn't say, "Let's figure this out." Instead, it panics. It shuts down. The inner dialogue turns sharp. "I messed up. I'm not good enough. I should just quit." This isn't laziness. It's neurology. The region responsible is called the medial frontal gyrus, MFG, the part of your brain linked to decision-making and emotional control. In perfectionists governed by fear, this area becomes overstimulated by errors. Your mind interprets every small failure as a looming threat. To avoid emotional danger, it pulls the brakes entirely. Procrastination, giving up, or obsessively over-editing isn't weakness. It's a survival reflex. Your brain is doing what it was trained to do, dodge failure at any cost. But here's where it gets fascinating. People with PSP, the healthier form of perfectionism, respond very differently to the same setback. When they slip up, another part of the brain activates, the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC. This is the mind's error detector, but rather than triggering panic, it slows things down. It invites reflection. What went wrong? What can I do better next time? Instead of shutting off, the PSP brain leans in. Why? Because for these individuals, mistakes weren't punished. They were allowed, even welcomed. They likely grew up in homes where errors were treated as stepping stones, not sins. When they succeeded, they were celebrated. When they failed, they were comforted, guided, not shamed. These early moments carved deep neural pathways that said, "You're safe, even when you stumble." So now, as adults, their minds don't brace for impact when things go wrong. They adjust, adapt, analyze. They see setbacks not as dead ends, but as detours worth exploring. This distinction explains why some people freeze at the first sign of failure, while others get curious. And the key variable, how failure was handled when they were still learning what failure meant. But perfectionism doesn't stop at good or bad. It actually sits on a complex spectrum, with 4 psychological profiles that blend different degrees of internal drive and external pressure. These combinations reveal not only how we pursue goals, but why we do it, and what emotions drive our success or sabotage. Let's break them down. 1. High ECP plus low PSP, the approval seeker. This is the classic people pleaser trapped in performance. On the surface, they may seem hard-working, even ambitious. But if you scratch beneath, you'll find anxiety, not purpose, driving their effort. They care immensely about how others see them, but have no internal compass of their own. So every choice becomes a test. Every mistake, a threat to their identity. Without personal standards, they float from expectation to expectation, trying to please teachers, bosses, partners, society, never quite sure what they actually want. Take a student, for example, who studies obsessively, not out of passion, but from fear of letting their parents down. They get top grades, but their joy is hollow. The moment their effort goes unnoticed, their drive collapses. They ask, why bother if no one sees me? This kind of motivation is brittle. Because it's not anchored within, it can vanish. The second praise is withheld. And when that happens, they don't just lose motivation, they often lose their sense of self. 2. Low ECP plus low PSP, the drifter. This combination is more subtle, but equally dangerous. Here, the person has neither external concern nor internal standards. They've stopped caring about success, judgment, or even meaning. It's not depression exactly, though it can look similar. It's more like motivational burnout. They might say things like, it doesn't matter, or who cares? But underneath that, apathy is often a long history of disappointment. Maybe they once cared deeply, but somewhere along the line, they gave up. Maybe no matter how hard they tried, they never measured up. Or maybe the world kept moving the goalposts. So now, they detach entirely. They live in emotional neutral, avoiding pressure by avoiding ambition. Their inner voice doesn't scream anymore. It's silent. In practical terms, this could be the college student who doesn't study or even attend class. Not because they're lazy, but because they've lost connection to any meaningful goal. No inner standards, no outer accountability, just drift. It's not that they lack potential, it's that they no longer believe effort matters. 3. Low ECP plus high PSP, the lone wolf. This is the self-starter, the quietly ambitious soul who refuses to conform. On paper, this person looks strong. They don't seek approval, they have clear goals, they're internally driven. And that's mostly good, until it's not. Because without any external feedback loop, their growth is limited to their own vision. They might be brilliant, but blind to how their ideas land. In business, this could be the startup founder so obsessed with their product that they ignore market feedback and fail. In relationships, it could be someone so focused on their truth that they forget compromise, connection, and emotional responsiveness. Their motto, I know best. But growth doesn't just come from within. Sometimes we need the mirror of others, feedback, even friction, to sharpen our perspective. When lone wolves shut that out, they risk becoming isolated, rigid, and disconnected from reality. The danger here isn't failure, it's stagnation disguised as freedom. 4. High ECP plus high PSP, the integrated achiever. This is the ideal balance. The person who sets high internal standards, but also welcomes external input. They don't chase praise, but they don't ignore it either. Their sense of self is rooted, but flexible. They know who they are, and remain open to refinement. Their mantra, I grow by learning, both from myself and others. They strive for excellence, but not to prove worth. They do it because they love growth. And while they may still feel fear of judgment, of falling short, they don't let that fear rule their actions. They use it as information, not limitation. Imagine a writer who pours their soul into a manuscript. When a reader gives harsh feedback, they don't crumble. They reflect. They ask, is this critique aligned with my vision? If yes, they revise. If not, they let it go. This is not perfectionism fueled by fear. It's refinement guided by wisdom. For most of us, this quadrant is where we want to go. But how do we get there, especially if our default wiring is fear-driven? That path requires both rewiring the brain and reparenting the inner child. Perfectionism, rewiring the mind, reclaiming the self. Escaping the trap of toxic perfectionism isn't just about thinking positively or lowering the bar. That's surface-level advice for a problem rooted much deeper, in memory, in brain structure, in learned emotional responses. To truly shift, we have to work at 2 levels. Rewiring the brain's habitual fear response, reparenting the inner voice that was shaped by past pain. Let's break both down. Step 1. Change the neurological pattern. When your brain has been trained to equate mistakes with danger, that response becomes automatic. Your medial frontal gyrus lights up at the tiniest sign of imperfection, like a car alarm that won't shut off. But here's the thing. The brain is plastic, not fixed. Every time you respond differently to an error, you weaken the old panic loop and strengthen a new one rooted in reflection. So how do you do it? Reframe failure, out loud. When you make a mistake, don't just mentally shrug it off. Literally say, something like, "This is information, not judgment. That didn't go how I wanted, but it's feedback for the next step. This is part of learning, not proof that I'm broken." Language matters. The brain listens, especially when spoken. Build a recovery ritual. Toxic perfectionists tend to spiral after errors. To disrupt that loop, create a small, automatic ritual that grounds you when you stumble. A short walk, deep breathing, plus journaling, listening to a grounding playlist, saying your anchor phrase, e.g., "I'm safe, even when I mess up." What matters isn't the content, it's the consistency. You're teaching your body that mistakes crisis. Step 2. Reparent the inner voice. Most toxic perfectionism is relational trauma in disguise. Maybe your caregivers were critical, emotionally unavailable, or simply overachievers themselves. Maybe love felt earned, not given. So now, your inner critic wears their voice. To heal, you need to speak to yourself the way you should have been spoken to as a child. This is the essence of reparenting. Name your inner critic. Give it an identity. The coach, the punisher, the phantom parent. This helps you externalize it and stop fusing with it. When that voice says, "You'll never be enough," respond with, "I hear you. But that's not true anymore. That's old pain talking." You're not silencing the critic. You're challenging its authority. Introduce the inner nurturer. This is a new voice, one you build consciously. It might feel fake at first. That's okay. You're not waiting for it to appear. You're training it. Start simple. Try writing to your younger self. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be real. You were worthy of love, even when you failed. Mistakes are how you learned. I'm proud of you for trying. Over time, this voice grows louder, and when it does, it becomes your default instead of the critic. Micro strategies for everyday healing. Here are small but powerful daily shifts that rebuild your perfectionism into power. Set process goals, not outcome goals. Instead of, "I'll write a perfect essay," say, "I'll write 500 honest words." Celebrate effort, not just wins. After a big presentation, don't just assess outcome. Ask, what did I show up for today that I once avoided? Build failure fluency. Each week, do one thing you're not good at, on purpose. Let yourself be clumsy. This rewires fear of imperfection at the root. Create a permission to suck list. Write down areas where you let yourself be mediocre for now. Social media, cooking, drawing. This normalizes imperfection as a growth stage. Perfectionism transformed, from fragile to free. So, where does this leave us? Perfectionism is not your enemy. It's your raw power, misdirected by fear. What begins as survival can become mastery, but only when it's driven not by avoidance, but by curiosity, not by punishment, but by passion, not by the fear of being unloved, but by the joy of becoming fully alive. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That is your choice now. You don't have to lower your standards. You don't have to lose your edge. You just have to shift the reason why you strive. Let it be love, not lack. Let it be growth, not guilt. Let it be wholeness, not performance. Because when you stop chasing perfection and start practicing presence, you don't just get better, you become real.